Like any card game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be expensive. I do want to make the claim that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually the best it's ever been for budget players, and I'm going to support that with 3 points. But in today's video, the main topic is I'm going to tell you what you need to know as a budget player, and while that might not necessarily be what you want to hear, I think that I have a lot of good advice, especially coming from someone that was a budget player for many years. So first off, why do I say Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the best it's ever been for budget players? I know it's a pretty controversial statement. I hear people saying cards like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring are just way too expensive and they feel like they have to play them. But overall, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just so much easier than it used to be, so much cheaper than it used to be. Things like the Megatins, which is probably the most influential thing that changes my opinion on this. The Megatins are huge. The Megatins make so many cards accessible that otherwise would have remained $20 to $30. Cards like Totally Awesome or Dimensional Barrier. And yes, the Zodiacs were in the Megatins, but obviously those got hit. But there's so many Tier 2 and Tier 3 cards that come on the Megatins that actually would have been expensive had the Megatins not been printed. And they're just incredible for making just straight value. It seems like every Megatin you just instantly make your money back, especially when you just buy the singles, then for sure you're going to make your money back because you don't have to take any chances. But more on that later. The other thing is that we have way better structure decks. If you've been following my bad Yu-Gi-Oh! Structure deck series, you might know that a lot of the older structure decks were just straight garbage. Yes, they had a couple good reprints and they had a couple good new cards, but overall, you couldn't just buy 3 structure decks and take it to a tournament and actually be successful. Sure, you might be able to buy 3 structure decks or even 2 structure decks and beat your friends a few times, but in general, you couldn't actually go to a tournament and be successful, where nowadays the structure decks are all incredibly powerful right out of the box, especially like the Dinosaur structure deck, which recently, I mean, it won Worlds, and it's a freaking structure deck. That's just incredible. And also, I feel like we have a lot more reprints than we ever did. Cards come out all the time, and not only like Gold Series types packs, but we have battle packs. Well, not anymore, but we used to have battle packs. Those had a lot of reprints in them. We have like the Legendary Duelist box, the structure decks that come with 3, that has full reprints. We had like the Battles of Legend pack, that was really good for reprints. Just a whole bunch of reprints coming out. The recent the Cyverse structure deck had like Cosmic Cyclone in it, which that was really good. So there's like a lot of things, a lot of different reasons why I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is better now than it ever has been for budget players, namely those 3. It's not perfect, but I think it's better. Actually, I know it's better because I've been a budget player in the past. So what do you want me to tell you? I think what a lot of budget players really want to hear is something that's not true. They want someone to come up to them and say, you know what? I know everyone's clamoring over $70 Ash Blossoms. I know everyone's clamoring over $70 Pot of Desires, but I actually have an equivalent card that's only $1. I saw this all the time, and I still get comments about Pot of Desires, which is one of the most polarizing cards. A lot of people were really angry and said Pot of Desires was bad and that there were equivalent cards that weren't as expensive. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of the times that these cards are expensive, it's because nothing else quite does what they do, where if they do what they do, it's not as effective. The card that I constantly saw compared to Pot of Desires, and I don't know why, is Hand Destruction. Well, I can kind of see why. Both of them say draw 2 cards. That's pretty much where the similarities end, and a lot of the times I feel like these equivalent cards are come up with without thinking about any sort of card advantage. Hand Destruction is a straight -1 that also lets your opponent cycle through their cards, where Pot of Desires is a straight +1. And I don't think everyone understands card advantage, so I think that it's harder for people to realize why that card just isn't very good. And I'm sure I'll get comments on this video saying, I played Hand Destruction and I won my local tournament, and that's wonderful. But in general, that card's not very good, and it never could replace Pot of Desires. However, there are ways to play this game on a budget, and I believe that I don't believe any of these are very difficult. First of all, never buy boxes. If you can avoid buying packs as well, that's good too. I know it's hard to do that, but don't buy sealed products that you have a random chance of pulling certain cards. Just Just don't do it. It's crazy. I will see, and I've seen this like time and time again, and even maybe some of you that are listening have done this. If you have complained about the game being expensive, but have also spent $80 or $60 or $70 on a box to not pull anything good, and if you don't see the irony in that, I don't know what to tell you, but here's your wake-up call. Sealed products are awful to buy. Yes, there's box openings on YouTube. Just go watch those. You don't need to buy the box. And I think that there's this issue of budget players thinking that the more cards they get for their dollar means that they're getting a more valuable purchase. I don't agree with this at all, and most competitive players do not agree with this at all. Why am I saying this? Well, you can look at value one of two ways. You can look at value in terms of dollars spent for the amount of cards that you got, or you can look at value for dollars spent and the mileage you get out of the cards you buy, even if it's not the same amount of cards. You can spend $70 on a box of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, get hundreds of cards, all the commons in the set, most of the rares, a lot of the supers, and then an ultra and a secret, or I guess a couple ultras, a couple secrets, and then end up using none of those in your tournament deck. Now you've wasted $80, but you got all those cards, but you can't use them. I think that the best way to be a budget player in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is with two different things. First of all, and this goes with what you should do with the money that you did not spend on the boxes, if you can do that, buy cards that can be used in a lot of different decks, even if they're slightly more expensive than you'd ever think you'd spend on like a playset of a card. I have some good examples of this. Obviously, staples are important. Staples are cards that can go in pretty much any deck. Things like Mystical Space Typhoon, Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclone, Regeki, and I know Regeki's really expensive right now, but cards like that can go in like anything. Kaiju's fall under this, good trap cards fall under this, things like Dimensional Barrier, Solemn Strike, both of which have been reprinted. All those cards that you can put into a variety of decks, pretty much no matter what the strategy, those are good buys. Other cards, I mean, I always have to shout out my boy Brilliant Fusion. Brilliant Fusion is a card that I've played in hundreds of decks in the past 2 years, and I definitely would say, even though it's more expensive now than when I bought it, that I would certainly buy it at this price because I've gotten so much mileage out of Brilliant Fusion. You can splash it in so many different decks. It is just insane the amount of decks you can play Brilliant Fusion in, which means that even though you're spending more money on each individual card, you're able to use it in so many different decks. I've been able to play Brilliant Fusion in just... I mean, I keep reiterating it, but it's like I didn't just buy Brilliant Fusion and play in one deck. No, I played it in just, even if you look on my YouTube page, you can see how many decks I've played Brilliant Fusion in. That's not even counting the ones that I just built for fun or played at a locals or played at a regionals that I didn't upload a profile for. So cards like that are phenomenal value, at least the value that I'm looking for, which is not necessarily dollar for the amount of cards, because you can go into a locals and buy 200 commons for $5, but that doesn't mean that you actually are going to do anything with those cards. And then the second thing is buy decks that aren't the best deck, but that will have a lot of potential for many months. Some ones right now that I would probably consider would be like Frogs, which are very cheap to build, and obviously I'm playing them, so I think they're effective. Light Sworns are really good as well. There's a whole bunch of variants with Light Sworns. Mermails have always been a good pick. They're not maybe as good right now, but they've been very popular for like 4 years. And then ABC is also a good pick, which you could then combo with your Brilliant Fusion. But these types of decks are really good for a couple reasons. First of all, they're all fairly cheap to build from the start, and then more importantly, when you get more money, if you have like an allowance or you have a job where you don't work many hours but you can accumulate some money, you can build upon these decks. You can build a basic Lightsworn deck as like Judgment Dragon Beatdown for basically no money. I mean, I say no money, but I mean like $50 or whatever, which is a pretty good deal when you consider building a deck from scratch. And then when you save up more money, you can then buy the Zombie engine. You can then buy the Brilliant Fusion engine, and you can keep adding to that Lightsworn deck. And Lightsworns have been viable for like a year now, possibly even longer. Although when I say even longer, I mean when Minerva was a prize card, and obviously not everyone can afford that. But Minerva's not a prize card anymore, so you don't really need to worry about that. You can just buy 3 Lightsworn structure decks and 1 Minerva and then some random rank 4s, and you're pretty much set to at least play at a locals, potentially even play at a regionals, and potentially get your invite. Probably not much higher than that, but I mean, how much can you really expect out of spending $50? To wrap this video up, I do want to say I have nothing against budget players, but I do think it's a little silly to consider or to be mad that like people that spend more money on the game and invest more of their money into it are at an advantage. I do not believe that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a pay-to-win game. I believe it is a pay-to-play game in a lot of the cases of competitiveness. And what I mean by that is that pay-to-win games means that people who have more money always win, or win 90% of the time. But actually, I think Yu-Gi-Oh!, and a lot of people have said this, is a pay-to-play game. So if you're talking at like a YCS level, almost everyone at the top tables has access to pretty much every card in the game outside of maybe prize cards. So if everyone has access to the same cards, you're just paying to play, but just because you spent more money doesn't mean you're going to win. Obviously, there's like a gap here between playing the best deck and playing the second best deck and the third best deck. But in general, if everyone's playing the best deck at the top tables, they all spent the same amount of money, so they're just paying to play. However, what they're not telling you, and what you might not be used to hearing, is that you can actually pay a lot less to play at a fairly efficient level. You just have to make some sacrifices, not by buying the highest rarity cards, not by buying the newest decks, but you can get your invite with little money. I've done it, and plenty of people have done it. I got my first invite with a deck that cost me $40 back when I was in high school, and I didn't have a lot of money. I did it, and you can still do it. And back then, it was a lot harder to find decks that were that cheap and that were also fairly effective. But anyway, in today's video, all I wanted to discuss is what I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Players on a budget should pay attention to, the steps they should take to make the most of their dollar, and also talk about that everything you want isn't always possible. If there are best cards in the game that are expensive, there's always a reason that they're expensive. There's not always just a solution for a $1 card to do an equal thing. But anyway, that'll end my discussion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I don't know if this will be a well-received video or a polarizing video. Not quite sure yet. Sometimes you guys surprise me, so let me know what you think. And I will see you guys later. Bye.